Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the Action Trainings 101 for the Blame Wall Street campaign. My name is Patrick Houston. My pronouns are he, him, his. And we are going to jump into this training about how to put an action together. But first, a few notes on tonight. I also want to invite everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat if you want to say your name, your pronouns, and if you are mostly affiliated with any particular organization, if you want to drop that organization. But many of us are just, involved in many things. So name, pronouns, and the organization you're affiliated with, if applicable. I'm also going to invite Ariel to introduce herself, and then I'll go through some brief notes on house notes for this training. To Ariel.
Hey everyone, I'm Ariel. I use she and her pronouns. I'm in New York and Brooklyn on Lenape land. I'm the US Bank's campaign manager with Stop the Money Pipeline. Really excited to be here tonight with all of you. Patrick is going to be leading us through most of the training, but I'll be here to offer any resources or answer any questions about the campaign at the end. So yeah, really delighted to spend this evening with you all.
Awesome, thanks Ariel. And thanks for being a powerhouse behind so much of this incredible Blame Wall Street campaign that's getting off the ground. Just so folks know, throughout the training, we'll have some moments for questions. So we're going to pause periodically and open up the floor for questions in the chat and in the and coming off mute and to ask questions. So we have several of those throughout. And then also, please just make, well, at this point, I think we all know, please try to stay muted when you're not speaking. And for those that just joined, this is being recorded. You can come off a video if you're not comfortable with that. Take yourself off a video. The one other thing I advise for everyone is we will be referring to a lot of documents, helpful resources throughout this training. One thing I advise is you can pull up a notes document, maybe on your computer, because we'll be sharing some links in the chat, and you can record those as we go. If this helps you. But also the second thing is, please don't be overwhelmed. Near the end of the training, Ariel is going to share a one-stop shop with all the links. But if you want to organize it yourself, you may want to pull up a notes doc on your computer and you can be taking some links from the chat or recorded notes as it's helpful for you. Okay, let's jump into it. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so the purpose of this training tonight is we want to support the success of the Blame Wall Street campaign by ensuring that all activists and anyone who's not an activist but is leaning into this has all of the tools and the knowledge that you need to plan and execute impactful actions. If you are not here for that training, you are still in the right place. We want to build as much people power as possible and exert that on Wall Street, who's responsible for this climate crisis. And at the end of this training, we want you to walk away with at least three things. We want you to have a strong understanding of the purposes of and the potential of these types of actions, these direct actions. We want you to have the knowledge and the resources to organize your own actions. And then it's not just about having the tools, right? But we also want to make sure you have that confidence and you're excited to pull off an impactful action. Next slide. And so here's a sense of what we'll be covering. We will do a very brief overview about this Blame Wall Street campaign. For it. We're going to start off just speaking on the need for escalation in this moment as well. And then we'll get into the heart of the training, and that is on the how to organize a successful action. So we'll go over action planning, that is setting targets, goals, and the actual function of the action. And then the preparation and outreach. We'll cover messaging and media and narrative and visuals. And then we'll do day of roles and run of show and amplification. So we'll be covering all of the components of actions. We also want to cover accessibility and safety, especially given some of the public health challenges that we are dealing with right now in this moment. And then as we begin to wrap up, we'll review all the resources that are available to help you with these things and some next steps. So first, let's briefly review why we are here. If you're on this webinar, you're no doubt already aware of the severity of the climate emergency, but I still want to ground us in the reality of this crisis by remembering those that are suffering right now. So in Jackson, Mississippi, I'm sure many of you have heard about this, tens of thousands do not have access to safe and reliable water. This is due to extreme weather events that put duress on our already aging water infrastructure. And of course, this is all on top of the pre-existing manifestations of environmental racism. And so this means that Black and Latinx and Indigenous communities are disproportionately vulnerable to these sorts of crises. And we have seen this already in places like Flint. We're seeing it again in Jackson, Mississippi. And we're here today to do everything in our power to stop seeing these patterns. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, we have a third of the country submerged due to these climate floods. There are 33 million human beings that are displaced. And this is just another devastating reminder, especially as we look at it, at the same time of Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, of these inequities that play out both within the United States, since a lot of us are from the United States, but also play out on the global North, global South comparison. And who is responsible for fueling these crises? Next slide, please. Wall Street. So can I get a volunteer to just read what we have here in the yellow and orange text right here on this slide? If anyone wants to pop off mute.
I'll do it. Wall Street fuels climate chaos by investing trillions in coal, oil, and gas. It's time to stop them. This fall, we're calling for a wave of actions that lay the blame for the climate crisis on those responsible: the banks, insurers, and investors funding the fossil fuel industry.
Great, thanks so much, Ron. And so I want to see how many of you, if you want to put just a star in the chat or anything like that, how many of you have already, first let's just start with, have heard of this Blame Wall Street campaign? And how many of you attended attended the training, the initial training and information session about this? Great, I see a couple coming into the chat. Great, so a good bunch of us have. Okay, this is very helpful. This is not just a simple question. This actually will ensure that we give the context that's necessary throughout the training. And so if we can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, so then I'm sure many of you are aware that over the last few years, the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition and other entities have been exerting more and more pressure and exposure on the Wall Street banks, asset managers, insurers, and private equity firms as well, for their responsibility in fueling the climate emergency. So then what do we hope to achieve with these actions? Well, one, we wanted to send a direct message to our targets that we know you're responsible and we are demanding you divest from fossil fuels and stop fueling environmental injustice. Two, we want to highlight Wall Street's, the role that Wall Street entities play in fueling the crisis, in fueling environmental destruction, and in fueling community destabilization. And particularly because Wall Street can seem very complex and distant and convoluted, right? But their deadly investments are clear as day. And so we want to communicate that through these actions. You don't have to be a Wall Street expert to see the injustices that they're responsible for. 3, we want to grow the number of people engaged in climate finance work. So let's remember, action inspires action. How many of us have sat at home, troubled with some injustice, and we don't take action until we see others taking action? So we want to inspire more action and have growth in our numbers for this fight. And then finally, we want to innovate on our actions and tactics. And so we'll get into those details later, but we're excited for the creativity and the new types of actions that you all are going to put together, because that can help us be more creative and thus more impactful. Slide, please. A note on escalation. A note on escalation. So these Blame Wall Street actions, we're asking for all of these Blame Wall Street actions, we're asking folks to think about, what actions have you done in the past? And so I'm going to continue talking, but can folks share if you have attended or organized a climate action targeting Wall Street in the past? Can you once again just put some kind of notification in the chat so we can get a sense of that? And can you think about what you've already done and then how you can turn the temperature up on these targets? After all, Wall Street is continuing with business as usual, even as we're seeing the crisis get worse and worse. In fact, just today, some of you may have seen the House. They're doing this investigation. This I think it's the Oversight Committee, and they've revealed some of the communications from fossil fuel companies that they've had about the climate crisis and their climate action and their greenwashing, and it's very revealing. So they're continuing with their business as usual with their ultimate focus on their bottom line, and we want to turn the temperature up on them. How can we turn the temperature up? How can we escalate larger size actions? How might we do that? This might require dedicating extra time to recruit more participants. We want to turn up to higher risks. We'll brief on higher risk actions more. We'll brief over that, but that's going to be shared in more detail in another training that we'll share the information for. We want to do additional targets and more sophisticated targets. So there's some targets in the past that we've hit a lot. There's others we've hit less. Throughout this whole fall, we want to add more targets and more sophisticated targets. And then we want to think, how might we do actions that are longer or repeated actions? Let me just give one example here, because this can be really effective. And I want to make sure folks don't have the idea that if I have to escalate on an action, that necessarily means that if I had 10 people last time, I have to have 30 people this time. Yes, we want larger actions, but how might, if you're still limited in your number of folks, how might you still escalate? Well, one example, you can do a 3-day consecutive action where on that first day, you have 3 folks show up to the target location. And then on the second day, you have 6 folks show up who are a little bit louder, who are continuing to leaflet. And then on the third day, you have 10 folks show up. And so whether or not those are repeated folks or are all new folks each day, this, from the target's perspective, is going to make our numbers and our power feel a lot bigger. That's one of countless examples, but I just wanted to share one. We also have an escalation matrix, which we'll share. And in fact, this is the first of the many links that we'll be sharing throughout this training. And again, no need to be overwhelmed. At the end, we'll share a one-stop shop with all the links. Next slide, please. And here's that training that we just referred to. So for higher risk actions on September 22nd let's go with Eastern time at 7:30 Eastern time, there will be a nonviolent direct action training as part of this Blame Wall Street campaign. So no worries there. That will all be covered in that action. All right, so let's pause there and see if there are any questions on escalation or overview or anything we've covered thus far.
This is Robin Anderson. I'm getting ready for Blame Wall Street here in San Francisco on the 20th. And I really don't know how to prepare for it. Should I make signs or, I don't know anybody that's going to be there. So what can I expect?
A few clarifications. This is September 20th. And are you organizing? Are you leading the organizing? Are you assisting?
No. I just joined it.
Oh, you just joined it. Okay,
I'm going to be
great.
part of it, and I've not done this before, and I haven't heard from anyone. So I just don't know what to expect.
Great. Well, that's a great question. I can respond briefly, and Ariel will probably also does also have some ideas. And also, thanks for saying your name when you ask the question. It's great if everyone can follow Robin's model. I guess one of the main things you can do is, well, hopefully there's a core action coordinator, and you can get in touch with them to get all the details. Often these actions have one or two, organization or several individuals or a individual who's the coordinator. And two, if you do have access to the messaging of the action, then it never hurts, in my experience, to go ahead and start your own signage that's in line with the messaging of the action, and you at least be ready to show up with something. But of course, just showing up with your body is very helpful. Ariel?
Yeah, I'll just share the San Francisco action I'm really excited about. We're also doing a lot of things, or the team that's planning the action is doing a lot of things that they hope is going to be a little bit of a surprise to the bank, which is like why there's not as much information online about what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do, I think that they're reaching out to everyone who signs up, but I'm going to put the email address of one of the action coordinators in the chat here. It's Christina Liu with Oil and Gas Action Network. I would reach out to her and see if there's, a specific place that she wants you to plug in. But I think, yeah, in terms of getting prepared, showing up with your body is plenty. Showing up with your body hydrated and fed, so you're ready to wearing comfortable clothes and comfortable shoes, is good. And then, having a sign, the San Francisco action is targeting Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase, about Chase. I think would all be great, but I would reach out to Christina. I wouldn't be surprised if you also get some outreach from the coordinators in the coming days to help prepare you.
Thank you. Perfect.
And over to Ron.
I have a sidebar question. Sorry. You're recording this. Is there a way that we will have access to the recording?
I can send around a copy of the recording to everyone who attended. I'm not going to promise tomorrow because I have a full day tomorrow, but by the end of the day on Monday.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone for your questions. We'll continue on and we'll have another question. Again, we'll have question sections throughout. So now, stepping back from not just about escalation, but into the heart of the training, how to organize a successful action. So first, choosing your targets. So again, there are plenty of targets, government targets and fossil fuel industry targets. But for Blame Wall Street, we are going to focus on the banks, asset managers, insurers, and pension funds. We'll talk briefly on to get the ideas flowing for you all. And I meant to mention this before, as we're going through this training, while we're in the moment, while you're dealing with it, I encourage you to be scribbling notes about what is my action actually going to look like. So by the end of this call, you feel like, oh, I'm ready to do this. And a week from now, you'll have these notes, your own notes to go back to that remind you of how capable you are for pulling off these actions. So a few things. So for ideas of how we can choose targets. We can ask the question, is there a Wall Street entity that's invested in a fossil fuel project near us, near you. For an example, Morgan Stanley is one of the biggest financiers of liquefied natural gas build out in the Gulf. And so folks in that area could target Morgan Stanley, even if that's outside of one of their projects, or a piece of fossil fuel infrastructure and not a Morgan Stanley office. Likewise, you can think, are there investors, any of these Wall Street investors near you who are connected to a big fossil fuel project? That is, you might be near a Citibank headquarters, but you might not be near any of the actual fossil fuel infrastructure. And that can help you decide, well, we'll go in Citibank for their investments that are geographically located elsewhere. The other is the headquarters of any of these of Wall Street entities. If there's headquarters located near you or a lot of branches in your region. So when we think of Wall Street, we often think, oh, it's all based in New York. Well, a lot of it is, but not all of it. There's countless examples of other areas, for instance, in Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia. That's where Vanguard has its headquarters. And so there's a group in Philadelphia, Equate, who's been doing some incredible work targeting the insurer Vanguard. And this can be as simple as a Google search, Wall Street headquarter offices in my state, in my city. And these might help you find some things there. You can look for key individual targets that live in your area. This could be key decision makers at any of these entities. Determining who the key decision makers are is not always, it can sometimes be an involved process. And on the next slide, which we won't go to yet, we'll just share some more resources where you might be able to see who some of the key targets are. And after that, Google and try to find where they might own property near you. And then another, this list is not exhaustive, but another is any that are financiers of major projects. Another example of that is like Bank of America and the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And for the media hook for getting attention on these actions, if there are very active and controversial fights right now, like the Mountain Valley Pipeline, actions aimed at those can result in more coverage. Next slide. And so as you're going through this process, there's at least two things that can help you brainstorm. One is the Rainforest Action Network, their Climate Chaos 2022 report. There you'll see the 12 worst US banks. And you do not need to feel compelled to hit only the top bank. You see here it's JP Morgan Chase. All of these targets, we want them all to feel our fury. And also on the Stop the Money Pipeline website, if you click our campaigns, then you'll see several campaigns there where you can click through. And this is what I was referring to before, where you might learn with one of these campaigns, oh, turns out my state treasurer, or turns out the CEO of this bank is located in my area for some reason. One last food for thought is on, lost my train of thought. Oh, it's on conferences. So you can also Google you can Google the names, you can Google, is there any kind of conferences or events that Wall Street targets are sponsoring? These targets have a lot of money. They try to use that money to improve their image, and we can hit them at those events. Okay, next slide, please. So action goals, setting action goals. We want to distinguish first, clear action goals are how we know what we're trying to accomplish. So they can also help us debrief after the action so that we can actually have a sense of how successful the action was. Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? Action goals are to be distinguished from campaign goals. The goal of a campaign may be to get the financial sector to stop funding fossil fuel expansion, broad, macro. But of course, that's not realistic for a singular action. So that's why there's going to be power in our numbers when we put together a bunch of singular actions that together can push these companies. Particularly some particular things that you can consider as you're setting your action goals. You want to take up the time and energy of, say, Citibank's leadership in your region by blocking access to the bank branch. We want to be educating members of the public on Citi's role. These companies do not like negative exposure. We can increase our skills as members and the skills of our movement. And so that's why there is large value in, even if you're in an area where there's not a ton of folks engaged, we can still build up our skills to pull off effective actions, regardless of our numbers. And again, we can grow our movement. We hope that all this, we can grow our movement from folks observing what we're feeling the moral call to take action and then joining. Next slide, please. And then now that you get to that point where you choose a target, you choose your action goals, then it's time to plan, well, what will the demonstration actually entail? And there are many things to consider when planning your action. One of the key questions that we encourage is to ask, what is the action logic? That is the degree to which your action is going to make sense from the perspective of someone who's not part of this group or who does not currently participate in the movement. And the best action logic has clear reasoning, and it ensures that your action makes sense to the average member of in the public. Often simple is better with communicating, trying to get your action to communicate the message. And what do we mean when communicating the message? Here's an example of what this could look like in our minds, on our leaflets, and through the actions that we do. For instance, because Morgan Stanley chooses to continue harming Gulf communities with their dirty investments in liquefied gas, we're blocking access to their offices to demand that they stop this insanity. And so we'll get through to visuals and all of that into messaging, but in our actions, we also hope that they can simply convey these things. Note too how this action logic turns the focus onto it puts the target on the defensive. It is their behavior that is insane. It's their behavior that needs to be defended. They have to answer for their wrongs. We are blocking their offices to demand they stop this insanity. So now we'll talk briefly onto, let me see, did we stop? No, we'll do one more and then we'll jump into questions for these last three sections. So just some examples to get your mind going. If you click once here, you'll see you can hear in this action, this was out front of the BlackRock office in New York City. This action had about 30 people, although they're not all seen in this photo here. And there's all the different, you can see everybody has the messaging. And so we had a very good photographer, Eric McGregor, who helped capture that. And click, please. And then speaking of escalation, so here we put stickers on, removable stickers, but they didn't know that, onto their building to kind of antagonize them a bit more. This was after a while of targeting BlackRock. Click, please. You can do actions where you block the entrances, and here you're escalating even further. As you see that big sign that says BlackRock, what side are you on? Those 6-foot-high placards have humans behind them, and they're holding them up and blocking the entrance to their offices. Next slide, please. I mean, not next slide, just click, thank you. And then here, I mean, you're getting the idea now. Here we you can chalk or put tape on the ground. We put tape on the ground with this one. And I also just wanted to point to this one briefly as the visuals. This one zoomed out, but as you can see in this action, there's not a lot of people, but there's about like 3 main banners and then a key message on the ground and then the key target name in the background. So as you're planning your action, you can also think about these visuals and how that's going to get communicated. Just 2 more here, click please. Oh, and then you can have fun. So if you're really struggling to, once there was an action that happened in the New York area where Target was living, it was really hard to access. They were way out in Long Island. And so we decided to have fun. We rented kayaks and we got signs and we went out on the water and were able to be, at the end of their huge, massive lawn in the water because we couldn't access the estate by land. If not by land, by sea. Next slide, please. So those are just some ideas to get, and then escalating yet more. Here are some activists who were blocking the entrance to not an open building, but the construction of, this one was JP Morgan Chase. This was blocking the entrance to JP Morgan Chase construction of their new headquarters. Okay, so I'll pause there. Questions on the targets, goals, and action planning before we jump into messaging and narrative, media, and visuals.
I think we have 2 raised
Oh,
hands.
2 raised
Deborah.
hands.
Yeah, I think maybe Deborah, you want to go first? I think I saw your hand come up first.
Thank you. This is Deborah, and I absolutely love the idea of removable stickers. And I know I can Google them, but do you have a source?
Yes. Well, it depends. Where are you located? If you're
I'm in Virginia.
in Virginia. Okay, I don't have a source for that region, but I'll be happy to, I'll share with you where I got these. Do you want to put your email in the chat and then I email you?
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sure, thanks for your question. The other hand was, yeah, sorry, the other person who had their raised hand, there was only one other person, I believe. You can ask your question.
I think that, okay, can you hear me? I came on a
Yes.
little late, but also in all this, does any follow-up or pre-action work like letters make a difference? Emails? Do you know anything about that in addition to this?
And that is letters or emails to the target, correct?
Right, right. And just saying, but you would have to have a lot more, I guess, than getting the attention. But I guess when you're getting the attention of other people and educating them, you're hoping that they will do something, right? In addition to the people that are there, when you get their attention and educating, they might say, oh, I wasn't aware of that. And then their move is to join others, but does letter writing campaigns have much effect? Do we know any science about that? Or your thoughts on it?
Thanks so much for bringing that up. I think it's a great idea. Our actions can be what we do on the day of, the main thing, but we can also build buzz up leading up to the actions, and particularly buzz that clearly lays out the demands in written ways, for instance, like through letters to the targets. And so this could look like driving in phone calls to your target in the days leading up or during or after, for that matter, to your action.
Question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I'm out of
Yeah.
Chicago and I met with Morgan Stanley. I want to know what you're planning for the 23rd of September. I will not be here, but I want to know what's happening in Chicago.
I can talk about what's happening in Chicago and also talk a little bit about the previous question about letters and what moves our target. So in Chicago on the 23rd, it's a regional action. So there's folks coming down from Wisconsin, coming in from Indiana, and other places, including as well as Chicago organizers. And there's going to be a series of actions actually. So it'll be an action on the Federal Reserve in Chicago and an action on Chase Bank. And then it's going to join up with the Fridays for, it's all working together with the Fridays for Future Global Climate Strike as well, which is on the 23rd. So on that map that I dropped in the chat earlier, I'll drop it one more time. I'll drop it again. You can find the Chicago action and read a little bit more about it and get connected to the organizers if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll also just to echo a little bit about what Patrick said about the letters. I think there's a lot of work that we're trying to do to move these targets, right? And there's a lot of ways to do it, right? A lot of these actions are aimed at their brands, right? They really like to invest an enormous amount of money in having a positive public image, and damaging that brand, saying like Citibank or Chase will have a television ad that's like, oh, we're so warm and fuzzy. Look at this couple that just bought their first home with a mortgage from Citibank, right? Going after that is highly effective because it's highly important to them. Popular education is also a really important part of our campaign. So you mentioned educating other people, right? So the actions that tell other people about how these institutions are climate criminals builds our movement. That's also really important. And then in terms of letters, right, as Patrick said, part of what we're doing, right, is being such a problem for them that we're like, what do we do to make this stop? And if you can write out the demands, if the demands are really clear, right, it's clear to them, like, man, we want to stop getting protested. Here's what they want, right? They know because you've done the letters. And it's also effective if you do letters or phone calls to do it in such a way that is like irritating to the recipient. So rather than having just one letter or having, all the letters delivered via email at once, having everybody email their own letter, at a different time so that the people who's receiving it gets 1,000 emails, right? Like I would be very unhappy if I showed up at work one morning and had 1,000 emails in my inbox. It would upset me. So thinking about that as well. And then, in terms of like what is going to move them, right? We understand that this is like highly, highly urgent and we're working with the power that we have, right? So everything we do right now is building power. And if we don't have the power that we need to win at this moment, I'm just sort of responding to some of Linda's comments in the chat. If we don't have the power that we need to win, then it's on us and it's only on us to build it, right? And that is part of what we're doing now. So if you had 6 people, right, bringing 10 people in, it's
Ariel,
yeah.
can I interrupt?
Please do.
Okay, I went with Morgan Stanley. They're going to send me their impact as to how they are investing in ESG when they decide to do that. But they've decided to get down on technology. Now, recently, Morgan Stanley put on an ad on television, but it doesn't do climate. It's like you said, we're nice people. So I'm going to send you this information they gave to me, okay? And then you can use it for your campaign.
Please do. That would be fantastic.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just conclude. I'm talking a lot, but just to conclude with the question of what does move them. Recently, there is a series of actions targeting Citi on their investments in Russian oil and gas interests, related to both the oil and gas component of that, but also the war crimes that Russia is committing in Ukraine.
Yes.
It was not a lot. Yes, Gazprom. It was not a lot of actions, right? It was a couple of days of actions. There were maybe 35 people. Patrick was a part of this, all told, in these actions. It started with a protest outside. It escalated to bird dogging. It escalated to people going into one of their very fancy, very important PR events and disrupting it. And by people, I mean like Patrick was one of those people. And we saw after this that Citi actually changed its policy on Ukraine. And which is to say, it didn't take the climate crisis, addressing the climate crisis in a meaningful way will take a mass movement of people. Getting these wins doesn't always take 1 million people, 1,000 people, or even 100 people. So there's things that we could do together that can create these wins. So I just want to have people feel that there is power in the, in the power in the numbers and the movement that we have, because we are winning. We are putting wins on the table, even if they're not as fast as we need them to be. With that, I'll shut up for now. I saw that Margaret had a hand raised.
Thank you. Are we also including the Congress in this, in writing letters? I had understood that Joe Manchin was putting together a bill. I don't even think it has a number right now, that is promoting additional investments in offshore drilling and oil. And I think that we want to make sure that we got to get the offshore drilling stopped. So, are we going just directly to the targets that are investing into the industry, or are we going to go after the Congress as well?
And this, for the Blame Wall Street, we are going to try to focus our energy aimed at the Wall Street entities, the banks, asset managers, private equity, and the insurers. However, by all means, please use your capacity to continue hitting government with your other advocacy and activism. Great, thanks for these questions. Thanks for these things in the chat. Yes, public shaming is kind of fun and very necessary. Let's move on, and we'll have another question section soon. I don't think I'm missing anyone. So first on the visuals of so now we're going to jump into the visuals, messaging and narrative, and messaging and media. So one of the, we already talked about well, first off, let's be clear, visuals, they matter. We use art, we use music, audio as well, to communicate our ideas, and to make this fight beautiful, and to grab the attention of folks. And one of the questions before was around the stickers, for instance. So we'll just zoom out from that, and you all should know that we have an arts toolkit, and that has downloadable images. So if your brain is starting to run with a bunch of arts ideas, we do have some support for that, and that will be shared. We'll make sure to share. In fact, I'll share that now, and I think we have that in the final document as well. So there's an arts toolkit. For those that just joined, we encourage folks to, if it's helpful, to have a little note stock on your computer, or if helpful, you can take some of the links we're dropping in throughout the training. But at the end, we'll share a one-stop shop with all of it. Next slide, please. Oh, and I just wanted to mention here, so, with this action, you have, just very briefly on the visuals, a banner that's not too crowded. It's visible from a distance. It has the core theme message of the action, a subtext to give people more context on about what is the demand of BlackRock, that they vote for climate now. And what is the pressure? The world is watching you. And then with the graphics, the eyes, you have something that reinforces the action. And so when you have these big yellow eyes sitting out front of the BlackRock office, it reflects back. It helps send the message. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's jump into the messaging and media. So the media is going to be a very important tool for getting our message across. During the action, passersby are going to take note, but to get into media can really help us exponentially increase the pressure on our targets. There's two main documents to use to communicate media to media. There's media advisories and there's press releases. I just want to briefly go over these two to give folks a sense. These by no means need to be intimidating documents. But media advisories, this is how we inform the media about an upcoming event. It's like an invitation. The goal is to grab the reader's interest and to make them want to come to the action. And you can keep these short. The media advisories don't need to be more than 1 page. This is more of a teaser to get them to attend. The media advisories should say who are the organizations that are participating, what is the action. It is a rally, it is a sit-in, it is a whatever it is, where it's going to be happening, when it's going to be happening, and then why. You could think back to the example before. Morgan Stanley continues to invest in liquefied natural gas in the Gulf. Activists are demanding that stop this insanity and perpetuating harm. So 1 page media advisories can be brief. When do you send it? You can send these up until, you can send it a week before your event. A lot of times they can be sent even sooner, since media news often moves so quickly, a day or two before the event. And of course, you can send it more than once. You can send it a week before, and then you can send it 2 days out. You want to follow it up with a phone call to really make sure you're selling your action beforehand, and make sure journalists can put it on their schedule. And we will share a sample media advisory where you can really just take the format and change the content. Let's go to the press releases. So the press releases are, they're a little bit more detailed. Press releases are what your ideal article of your event would look like. They still aim to be concise, though. So the goal of the press releases is to give reporters all the information they would need to write the story, even if they couldn't make it to the action. When do you send press releases? You usually send these directly after, or you can do during, or directly after the action. And at the top, we also have a sample press release, which we'll share. But some important things to include is the contact information of who they can follow up with in your group, and then attention grabbing headline. And then beyond that, just like the media advisory, it's going to include the who, what, when, where, why, but you can go into a bit more detail. Still, you should aim to keep these to about a page. One last thing on the media, the messaging and media with the advisories and the releases. Many of us may not have experience reaching out to media before. You can think about it very practically. I want to get somebody's attention onto this event that I'm doing. What do I need to share with them? And one other thing, I often think of the media advisory as kind of like the resume. Here are your top line bullets. And then I often think of the press release as like the cover letter. Now I'm going into more detail to tell you a little bit of a story of the who, what, when, where, why. Next slide, please. Did the messaging and narrative slide, did that not come up? Did I overlook that? Oh, there it is. Okay, great. I'll be brief here. Narrative. Here, we do want to make sure across all of these actions that are happening across the country, we do want to make sure that there's some cohesion in our messaging all across the country so that the overall theme comes through clearly. So we'll also be sharing our messaging and narrative document. And we do want you to try to make sure that we are consistent with some of the fundamental messaging. And here it is written, some of it written word for word. If we stop the flow of money, we stop the climate disasters. Looking for someone to blame these floods on? Try Wall Street. Repetition is key with breaking through on messaging. Okay, now we can hop up to questions on visual, 2 slides from here on visuals, messaging, and narrative.
So we had two questions come in on the chat that I think it'd be useful to actually talk about rather than just answer in the chat. One is, how do you message media when part of the action is potentially arrestable? And the other is, how much time do you focus on social versus traditional media? I don't know, Patrick, if you want to, if you have initial thoughts on either of those.
Sure, and you can jump in and add. I'll start with that first one. Good question on that first one. The question is, how do you message to media when part of the action might be secret because it may involve some nonviolent civil disobedience, if I heard correctly. A lot of times we will leave the details of the civil disobedience component out if it threatens to compromise the effectiveness of that component. However, you can put teaser language in of this action will include, this action will be unconventional in some way, or this action will include some escalation that you may not want to miss. So you can put in these hints and teasers. Ariel, you want to respond to the second question because I forget it.
The second question is, how much time do you focus on traditional versus social media?
This can vary in my experience. It can depend on the location too. So I'll give one example, and Ariel, feel free to add. So one example is, if you're in a large metropolitan area like San Francisco, for instance, I'll use that as an example. It might be more difficult to get media attention for your actions because of all the other newsworthy things that are happening in your area. And so you might decide, look, we're going to have just 5 people for this action. We're not even going to spend our time trying to get media out for this small scale action. We're going to put more of our emphasis onto social media as opposed to earned media outlets. So that's going to vary a lot given which area you're in. And in a minute, we'll talk more about social media promotion. Ariel, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think just to echo what you said about messaging and action that might have a civil disobedience component, some sort of like code words that I've used in the past are like escalation or direct action. As we know, escalation can mean many things, direct action can mean many things, some of which involves civil disobedience, some of which does not. But in terms of like press outreach, I find those two terms to be good kind of teasers, if that makes sense. And yeah, social media versus traditional media, I think it's just going to depend on where you are, what you're trying to do, how visual your action is, and also the goals of your action, right? If a primary goal for you is to inspire other activists, social media might be more of a focus. If a goal is to make sure that the regional head of city sees it, traditional media might be more of a focus. So it'll depend on your goals. I know that's not like a really complete answer, but I hope it helps.
Great, thank you, Ariel. Okay, let's continue on then to the next slide. And so folks know, so we are just a little check-in. We are have just a few sections left. We're now going to review outreach and amplification. So that last question was perfect segue. And then we'll go into accessibility and safety, resources, and next steps. So thanks everybody for hanging in there. We're at the hour mark and this training goes until 9. Okay, so on to the outreach. So a bunch of ways, as you can see here. I won't belabor this too much, but you can, if you have access to a list for your organization, and do your email blast. We also encourage people to have people sign up either on Action Network, or you can use Google Forms as opposed to just sending out the email information. So you can then follow up with people who've RSVP'd and can track RSVPs. You can ask Stop the Money Pipeline to use its resources to amplify your action. They can look to see who's active in your geographic area and help you amplify that. And there's another form where you'll be able to request that assistance. which we'll share. You can use social media to make sure folks know about your action. Again, repetition is key. You might feel ridiculous posting it for the sixth time in lead up to your action, but for many folks, the sixth time is going to be their first time seeing it. So go all out. Finally, in my opinion, in my experience, nothing beats one-to-one outreach. Calling folks, texting folks in your network, personally inviting them to attend goes a long way. And let's all think for a minute, like, how many of you are likely to attend an action if someone you know asks you, as opposed to just seeing a post online? Are you more likely to attend if someone you know is asking you to attend? And then also if they're asking you directly and not through a email to 100 or 1,000 people. One other little thing you can do is activism. It's social. So you can also ask, when somebody confirms they're going to attend, you can ask them, can you bring one person? Can you bring 3 people? And that can quickly amplify our numbers. All right, next slide. Now let's talk about amplification in kind of three categories: before the action, during the action, and after the action. As you're planning your action, we encourage you to designate a photographer. And then we encourage, a photographer can be very helpful. Whether it's a professional photographer or someone who has a good quality phone who can get good shots. Videographers and live streamers can also be very helpful at capturing your action. Value, and there's value in having both, the live stream moment. The videos, for instance, can be used in the future to put together action videos. During the action, to amplify, again, there's the live stream and the post on social media. Again, we encourage folks to designate folks for these roles even before the action, though, so that during the action, there's already that person who knows they're going to be posting on Twitter and Facebook, and the live streamer already knows they're going to be recording. And then after the action, there's several ways where you can amplify more. You can continue to post yourself on social media. There is a folder where you'll be able to upload your photos and videos. There's a shared Google folder, and that's going to be very helpful for Stop the Money Pipeline to put all these things together and help amplify your action. So that's link is going to be shared as well. And then you can also send an email right to Alston at Stop the Money Pipeline. I'll put his email in the chat right now. And he works on Stop the Money Pipeline social media, and he'll be able to help amplify. All right, and we'll pause there. Questions on outreach and amplification? All right, yeah, pretty straightforward, right? It's pretty straightforward, but just to make sure it doesn't get overlooked, it's easy to get so focused on the tangible and the physical, and then after your very impressive, successful action, you see that in the digital sphere, it's very quiet, and it looks like you've hardly done, put all that effort into your action. I see we do have a question here in the chat. Does it matter how many people attend an action in your opinion? Good question. Or is there a minimum number that is good? Good question. That varies widely. That depends on the type of action that you're doing. If you're leafletting, you can get that is giving out information flyers to, say, employees at the headquarters. You can do that with 3 people and have an effect where they, in the lunchroom, they're now talking about what's on your flyer. If you're going to a target that's been hit a lot, then it can be valuable to have a large number of folks. But that varies widely depending on what are your goals for your particular action, depending on who the target is, and perhaps how they've been targeted in the past. Okay, let's move right along as we're getting towards the end of this training. So we wanted to share some notes on accessibility and safety. I'm on the wrong screen. So as you all know, we're currently experiencing multiple overlapping global health crises, COVID, monkeypox, polio, and principle that we're operating on is we want to make sure everyone feels safe. We are responsible for everyone in our community and for each other, right? For everyone's collective health. So while some action takers may be more comfortable with some risks than others, we want to make sure that we're creating spaces that are accessible to everyone, including immunocompromised folks, including disabled folks. And of course, a lack of safety protocol excludes people. And we can also often easily overlook that because if they're not there, we may not even think about it. So we want to go into our action planning with those principles. We want to share some key ones here. We encourage folks to mask up and for your actions to ask people to be vaccinated and boosted. We know you might not be able to dictate everything of everyone who attends your actions. We can even ask attendees to test. Often, a lot of areas have free testing. So to test before actions, if the action's inside, we want to be even more cognizant of how people might be at risks. Those risking arrest must satisfy being vaccinated and boosted and being tested before. And this is because if folks are going into our already unjust criminal justice system for even just a few hours, we do not want to be spreading things that are going to be difficult for folks to recover from inside. Next slide, please. We encourage folks to provide PPE, masks, hand sanitizer for attendees. We'll get into the resources that we'll provide to assist with things like that. After the action, it's good to tell attendees to tell the action coordinators if they've tested positive after the action, so that the coordinators can tell everyone who attended, hey, be careful, quarantine, and we can watch out for community spread. Let's ask and not assume when we're approaching people. Some people, that's with physical contact and proximity. And then we also want to provide a variety of action roles. So that's another one where just because maybe part of the action is inside, it doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for some folks to be outside taking additional action. All right, and now we'll jump over to resources. Which area we'll cover?
Great. So we went over a lot of the hows of the actions, right? We just want to make this as easy and accessible for folks as possible. So I want to go over some of the resources that Stop the Money Pipeline is able to provide to folks this fall, and that you can use to make your action incredible. So support and funding. We're able to provide grants of up to $1,000 for action takers this fall. So if you're organizing an action that you can put on a map, or if you can't put it on the map because it's like secret ahead of time, we're going to do something a little spicy, we can provide up to $1,000 to support your actions. So if you're like, this would be so great, our action's going to be so great, it would be so much better if we could have a new beautiful banner printed, or if we could buy costumes for Street Theater, or if we could have a musician, or if we could pay a photographer. And it's going to be all in the document that I drop at the end. There's a grant app request form. Feel free to fill it out, and we will probably be able to support your action financially. Important links. Register your action on the Action Network map. This accomplishes a couple of things. It shows the momentum of this campaign, right? Seeing a lot of actions on the map. Somebody looking at it, one of our targets looking at it, it's going to see it, be like, it's a lot. It also allows other people in your region to see actions, to see your action and to sign up. And that's a way to build. The photos folder, send your photos to Austin from your actions. Not only will Austin post them on our social media so people can see them and be inspired, we'll save them, we'll share them in campaigns in the future. So you can drop them in the folder, or you can even just email Austin. Patrick put their email in the chat. But yeah, we would love to amplify your actions. In the action toolkit, which is going to be one of the links that we're sharing in a minute, there is a document from an activist named Jean Sharp that is a list of 198 nonviolent direct action ideas. So if you're like, man, I really want to do something, but like, I don't know what, or I'm tired of the things that we've already done, what would be new? That's a great resource to look at and to get inspired. We also have an arts toolkit, and that has downloadable arts images for folks to use, as well as a link to order this art to your home. So you could use this art, you can put it on cardboard and make it into a poster. You can wheat paste it on Bank Target. You can hang it in community centers, libraries, anything like that. And then this one-page document with resources that Patrick just dropped. Yes, and I can email as well, probably on Monday if that's okay. But that document that Patrick just dropped has got the one-stop shop that has most of the links and most of the things that we've been discussing this evening. And I think that is it on resources. I'll also just mention, it's not on here, but we do have action coaching. So if you would like the support of an experienced action practitioner, as you put together an action, somebody that you can meet with or talk to weekly or even more frequently, or less frequently if you want, we can support you with that. We have a bunch of folks sort of ready to go and ready to help support. And I know that there's some folks on this call who are already working with our action coaches to make things really exciting. And I think that brings us to the questions on accessibility, safety, and resources. Any questions on any of this? Are we still interested in one-on-one? Let's do Deborah's question and then we'll get to that. So go ahead, Deborah.
Hey, thanks again. You all are doing an amazing job. I love Stop the Money Pipeline's ability to amplify the action to get more people out. Do you have any cautions about that process? Like, people you don't know coming and how to kind of get them on board, with what's expected, like if they just show up the day of and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that. And Patrick also, I think, has experience with some of this as well. I think it sort of depends on the type of action that you'll be taking and what kind of expectations you'll have of your action takers. If you create an event on our map, you'll have the ability to email everybody that registers for it and to see the email addresses of everyone that registers. So if you have like particular things that you want people to consider, you can email them ahead of time. It can also be helpful to have like a little huddle before you start with everyone at your action to go over expectations. And I think this is like particularly important if anything that like does involve higher risk to folks to have really clear expectations ahead of time, or anything that you anticipate, even if you're not anticipating risking arrest, anything you anticipate there will be a police presence at. It's really important to get everyone sort of on the same page about how you're interacting. So to have like a huddle ahead of time when folks show up, so people know, who the action coordinator is, what's expected of them, and also just to get people hyped and excited for what you're going to do. If you're doing something that's like particularly sensitive, like particularly spicy or particularly high risk, so that could be, for example, like a home visit or an action where a small group of people are taking like a high risk, doing like a higher risk nonviolent direct action, or like arrestable, something like climbing a building or a banner drop. You might want to not publicize that ahead of time or invite new people to come, and that's okay. And you can just feel free to skip putting it in public. Like, let us know ahead of time so we can support you. but putting it in public ahead of time. I don't know, Patrick, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think all that is spot on and covers the bulk of it. And just there's only one thing I would add. And then at the action, you know, if there is a MC, it can be helpful for or any go-to person for them to, and it's an action that entails a higher risk component of a designated team. It can be helpful for just that MC to communicate that. Hi, everyone. After the intro, you know, at some point there will be a designated team that's going to break off and go do another action. We are going to stay here and continue our nonviolent action here. You know, so you can just distinguish that so folks aren't confused in the moment and jumping into roles they're not prepared for.
And I'll just add, if you do have an action that you're planning that is going to involve higher risk or like higher risk of interaction with the police, we're doing another training next week that's specifically about that. I really encourage you to attend, and I would also really encourage you to work with an action coach, because we want everyone to stay safe. We know that the police and carceral system are really violent institutions. So I think that's something we want to make sure people are really, really supported in if that's something they're considering. I see Ron and Joanne.
Yes, we've signed up. We live in the area outside of Philadelphia. So I see that a Quaker group are going to go to a CEO's house that's not far from us. And so, I mean, I noticed that they have a little get together beforehand, but I mean, you just hit on that. So we're wondering, you know, I mean, obviously, I mean, we're older, right? And so we're used to going with the social flow. Not that we don't stand up for things that aren't right, you know, but the point is, so we're going to do it. It's going to feel funny, you know, because they're going to have neighbors, and you know what I mean? It's going to feel a little funny, but did you want to say anything more? I mean, about that, ones that you've been to, some advice? I know we're going to probably have some kind of signs and banners. And then the other one before that is going to the Vanguard headquarters, which is not far from us. And I think it's an indigenous group from Peru who are challenging there's more developing of fossil fuels in their area. So any other advice you can tell us, or, you know, how to keep a straight back, whatever you want to tell us about.
Yeah, Patrick, do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Sure. Let me make sure I have the question correct. And if I do, I definitely have a thought to share. That is, going into actions perhaps with a partner you haven't worked with before, or a style of action you haven't done before, and having the confidence and comfortability you need to participate effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. I do have thoughts here from going into, you know, I recommend at least two things. One is, before the action, in the day before, in the hours before, in a few minutes before, or in all of it, remind yourself why you're doing this. And if you feel, which I imagine you do, you are on the right side of history.
Yeah.
So when I go into this event and I'm acting like a fool because I had this weird craft that I'm going to be walking through this conference with, you know, just remember what is my purpose and where am I in history, you know? So that's one thing that I try to don before I go into actions, to get in that right mental state. The second thing is I try to go in with stay calm and take deep breaths. Stay calm and take deep breaths. And so when things are happening unexpectedly, not that actions necessarily have to, but when things are happening unexpectedly, you know, being able to take a deep breath when something unexpected happens and have a moment to think before responding.
I'll also say Equate, as somebody wrote in the chat, Equate is a really lovely and welcoming organization. And I think with them in particular, if you feel nervous, you feel scared, this is new to you, you can certainly reach out ahead of time and say that, right? Say that I'm committed to doing it. I want to do it. This is new and I'm nervous, and I just want you to know, or I have a question. And I think they would be happy to support. But this is how we grow. We all have done things that have made us scared. The last time I did an action where that felt disruptive, I was really nervous. I couldn't eat, ahead of time. And as Patrick said, right, took deep breaths. I took support from the people who were there with me. I wasn't alone. And then it felt great afterwards, and it was effective. So I think home visits are a highly, highly effective tactic to really show people where, like in their homes, right, that this is coming for them, right? Because millions of people are not safe in their homes from the climate crisis. So why should the people responsible for get to feel comfortable, get to close the door on it? So yeah, you're doing the right thing. And we all support you.
Okay. Thank you.
Ariel, this is Amy. Can I add one thing to that?
Oh yes, and Amy recently did a great home visit in North Carolina. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I've been driving. I'm at a stoplight, so I thought I'd get off silence and just chime in. I think the other thing that you can ask about is asking them about the kind of roles that they have. One of the things that was really important when we went and did our home visit was having somebody who knew the ropes, deal with angry neighbors or frustrated neighbors or upset neighbors. I heard you say something in what you said made me remember that. If you're going into what feels in some ways like people's private space, even though it's really not their neighborhood, to have somebody there who really can be the liaison to work with those individuals so that you can stay focused on whatever your role may be, which could be simply just holding a sign while someone takes a good media shot, or if you're the person who's going to go up to the door and have the conversation, which is the role that I chose to do. I had a great coach who helped me and actually walked me through what we would do beforehand. So role playing ahead of time is super helpful too. So I just wanted to share those things because that was the first time I ever did it, and it was a fantastic experience. But definitely those pre-planned roles really helped me feel clear in what I was doing, and that other people had my back and knew what they were doing. And I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all three.
Great. So I think we're ready to move on to our final section. We'll just do next steps and we'll close that. Ariel will do next steps, just the 2 next steps, and then we'll close out.
I'm sorry, I'm doing next steps. I was like, okay, so next steps. So this is the first in a series of 3 trainings. You can just come to this one if you want, but if you are feeling like you want to learn more, you can come to our next 2. So they're going to be on same day, same time for the next 2 weeks. The next one is the basics of civil disobedience. So would really, really encourage this one if you are thinking about taking any kind of action that is going to involve any kind of potential interaction with the police or criminal justice system. So it'll go over it's not a total and complete nonviolent direct action training. It's not a total and complete civil disobedience training, but we will be going over what kind of roles and resources you might need if you are interested in organizing or even participating in an action where there could be a risk of arrest. So those links to register are also in the document that we dropped earlier. The action after that is on using art in your actions, right? So we have some incredible art activists who are going to go over how to wheat paste, how to use street theater, how to do other kinds of artistic ways of spreading our message, which is beautiful and which is important because it's attention grabbing. It's important because it's part of what makes us people. So that is going to be, again, 2 Thursdays from now. And I think that's it. The next step is to think, organize, attend or organize an action. We'd love to have you do that. And my email is in the chat. If you need support in that, please do reach out.
Thank you, Ariel.
That's exactly it. And just so for folks who may be feeling like, oh, that was a ton of information, there's so many components, please know we just packed into an hour and a half what you're going to be doing, what you can do over 2 weeks, a month, whenever you decide to plan your actions. So this can be divvied up into sections. And again, that resource document, which we can drop again in the chat, has all of these steps. Oh, there it is already. Thanks, Ariel. All these steps laid out. The other thing I just want to leave us with is, can we just imagine it is December, we're all starting to slow down from our work lives and our activist lives for just a bit for that holiday in the new year. And we're looking back over the last few weeks, last few months of seeing news articles popping up, of seeing on our social media feeds, actions happening all across the country, and knowing that we played a little part in that we pulled off one action with 3 people, with 30 people, or with 300 people, that you played a part in that momentum and that movement building. So this is going to be a really big next few months with this Blame Wall Street campaign, and your efforts are definitely going to help that. So thanks for taking an hour and a half out of your evening to join this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank
Thank
you
you all
all.
for joining. Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much. Be well.
Good. Amazing.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good luck.